This video is an excerpt from our weekly podcast, Two Asian Blokes. For the full episode and more content like this, find us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Also, don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video. Hello everybody, welcome to Two Asian Blokes podcast, a podcast where we talk about Asian pop culture, films, TV shows, comic books, manga, anime, games, food, music, whatever we feel like at the time really. My name is Dan with a H and with me is my co-host Tavi.
Let's just get straight into it, shall we?
We're here to talk about Asian horror. Yeah, this is one of your favorite topics, Tavi.
Definitely one of my favorite genres of film. J-horror was my gateway into Asian horror films. Of course, now, there's Korean horror, there's Thai horror, Hong Kong horror. I think I'd say I'm probably most familiar with J-horror and K-horror. But what was your first J-horror? Because for me, it was The Ring. I mean, the American remake Ring was my first.
Yeah, I think it was for me as well. And I think I actually watched it at your house for the first time. There's a bunch of us.
This is a pretty funny story. When we were chipper, early teens.
But we lads.
I think I had a massive birthday party where I invited a bunch of us over. And we rented The Ring, the American remake. And actually one of the few remakes that are actually good.
There was a bit of buzz about around this remake as well, yeah? Like, we'd heard it was pretty scary. And we knew the basic premise of it, right? Going into it?
Yeah. The 7 days. Like, I think when I first heard that scared the premise just scared the fucking shit out of me. Just like the dead static sound. You wouldn't see that anymore now because analog signals are shut off. But yeah, we watched it at my place and scared the shit out of me. As I'm sure it scared the shit out of most of us. But I think after everyone left, I think there's a few of us that slept over. So we wanted to watch something on the TV. And then my TV it didn't show any picture, it just made the static noise and it just broke.
I was there. I had never seen a TV act that way before. Like, we tried to switch it on and there was just a black screen but a thin white line across the middle of the screen. And it was going, and
dude,
like,
what the fuck, man? That was so fucking scary. The last thing that TV had screamed was The Ring. So that scared the shit out of me for a week. I couldn't sleep in my room for a week after that. I had to sleep on the couch downstairs because I was so afraid that Samara was going to come out and fucking wrench my jaw open. Obviously, I didn't get spirited away unless I was and replaced as a doppelganger that I just don't know about. But yeah.
It was a fun time, right? That
was really, really fun time.
The film in itself, it was good.
Yeah, I haven't seen it for a while, but I think the strength of that movie is its production values because they could afford to make things look a bit grittier and grimier.
So Ringu was 98 and the remake was 2002, so 4 years in between. But obviously they've got the American money behind the remake.
Well, a fun fact about the original itself was a remake of The Ring. It never made it overseas, but it was on Japanese TV. But it was essentially a porno. It had a lot of erotic scenes. The Ring really started off my love affair for this genre because I guess as Asians growing up then, I'd always wanted to see the Asians on the screen. And it was really cool to see that it was these Asian horrors that were being praised as like the pinnacle, like the most scary horror you can watch at the time. And I think a lot of that I held a lot with pride. So I wanted to seek out as many horror movies.
Like in the past, like they'd kind of like taken some martial arts elements from Asian cinema, but given it like enough of a spin to justify calling it their own. But like the Asian horror and American remakes of Asian horror films, they don't try to hide the fact that it is a remake of a Japanese film or a remake of a South Korean film. In fact, they kind of advertise the film as such, which to us as young Asian people, this is what our background can kind of offer to the world. Like it was a very big source of pride.
What do you think of when you hear Asian horror?
I think of ghost girl with long black hair covering her face. So, Sadako from Ringu, basically.
Sadako,
Samara from the remake, if you like. But yeah, the Kayako from Ju-on. Like creepy kids. There's always a creepy kid lurking somewhere. It is very different to the Western horror films of the time. Like, I think that was kind of during a slasher resurgence maybe in Western horror. Back when like Wes Craven's Scream came out. So yeah, the tones are completely different as well. Like the Asian horror films like Ringu and Ju-on kind of have this undertone of just hopelessness and despair. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's always like kind of apocalyptic in the sense that they're unstoppable.
Yeah, there's no escape from it. You know, these ghosts, they don't play by the rules. There's no way to reason with them. You just kind of have to get killed, I guess.
Yeah. It's that, because if at the end of the ring, there's basically no way to stop it except passing it on, the curse. Well, in respects to like J-horror, it probably would have started with, obviously, you know, folklore plays a big part. Well, you're talking about the very quintessential look, the white dressed with long hair covering the face, ghost, as I think what they call like the yurei, which is like, you know, ghosts born from like wanting vengeance, and they're often like, you know, virginal women who have been wronged by men. I think the first appearance of that was from a fairly old like Japanese anthology horror. I think it's called Kwaidan, which is not super scary, but it was kind of like these vignettes portraying different folklores in Japan. But the whole ghost aspect was not maybe even the first iteration of J-horror. There was a lot of body horror that came out of Japan. I think there would be like a Tetsuo, the Iron Man, which I haven't seen yet. Okay. But it was definitely Ring that brought it to the West.
I think Ringu as well was kind of a departure from traditional Japanese horror films. Like, you mentioned that a lot of it in the past is based on folklore, but I feel like Ringu was a little bit different.
It's basically its own folklore. It's its own fairy tale.
Exactly. It's not really... It's more based on Japanese society's fear of technology, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like a lot of people kind of consider Japan to be technologically advanced, but I think the reality, in some ways they are, but like you still see people using flip phones there. People still carry around pages. They refuse to get rid of fax machines for some reason. It's a little bit bizarre, and I think like some of that is just like underlying current of technophobia, especially during that era.
Did you ever watch Pulse, or it's called Kaido?
I've heard of Kaido. I've heard it's very scary, and I know a bit about the plot. But explain what Kaido is.
So it's basically it's kind of like a group of people. It doesn't really follow any particular person, and what's happening is that like all over the country, people are kind of shutting themselves off when they come onto this website that says like, do you want to see a ghost? And they'll click on some things and it'll just show like this ghostly image. And then when people see this image, they get like super depressed and they eventually become shades and disappear. It's not as scary as some of the other, like it's not as viscerally, the images aren't as visceral, except for there's a very famous scene in that movie where one of the characters is searching this kind of dank place, and then there's this like ghost woman who
it's always a ghost
is just
woman
standing at a distance at the end of a corridor. But it's not the typical like long-haired ghost. She's very obscured by shadow. She's just like wearing a black dress and short hair, and she's just walking towards this character, and it's a really long take, and then she starts doing that like contortionist movement, and it was quite frightening. That's probably the highlight scare, but it's definitely a lot more that, like, you know, technophobia, where, like, you know, everything is connected, because this is the infancy of the internet almost. It's like dial-up.
2001, right?
2001, yeah.
But there was a remake.
There was a remake, which
is that any good?
I haven't seen, and I'm not gonna bother seeking it out because I'd already watched the I remake. That
It's
really
called
pissed
Pulse,
me off.
if anybody wants to watch a 2006 remake. Yeah, I feel like 2006 is probably too late to make a film like that, right?
Yeah. Oh, get me more Japanese horror now. Just like fucking everyone's like, oh, this is too much horror. But yeah, I think the marquee horror films, or the ones that I think of, is, you know, Audition, Ring, Pulse, Dark Water, which I watched yesterday. It's a great movie. Not as scary as well, but like kind of sadder undertones, I guess.
It's more of a drama, right? With scary elements.
But when I think of J-horror, I often think of low-budget filmmaking, because J-horror found its life through what they call V cinema in Japan. There was a subsection of filmmakers who were given money to make straight-to-video releases. And when we think of straight-to-video here, it's like, you know, whatever, like a Chuck Norris movie. Well, just something very
a lot of like
low budget.
Yeah, a lot of horror sequels are direct-to-video in the West.
But I think over there, the mentality was, just because it was a video release didn't necessarily mean it was bad.
Sure.
So you had a lot of like...
So many VHS machines in Japan, probably still.
Yeah.
People holding on to that technology, that outdated technology. People still rent stuff in Japan. Tsutaya is still a thing.
Tsutaya, for sure. Like, yeah, man.
I love Tsutaya. I used to have a membership when I was living there, and I don't know, there's just something like really nice about going to a video store and just browsing the collection.
I love browsing physical media. Like, here in Australia, I'd like browse JB or whatever is left in terms of physical media.
Sure.
Like, I've recently been watching a lot of behind the scenes stuff for material for this podcast. But it's also like, as a filmmaker, this stuff is gold, you know. You can hear the different opinions from directors, from cast.
Sure.
It's great.
And not all of it has been ripped and put on YouTube. Like a lot, especially more of the obscure stuff. Like, did you know? Like, I remember the DVD of The Ring. It has the actual video from the movie. Yeah. So the VHS that the protagonist watches. Yeah, that's a special feature on the DVD. So, and then when you watch it and it plays to its completion, the DVD cuts to black and there's just a ringing tone. So I mean, it's just nice.
I've got the trilogy of Ring films on Blu-ray, and that's where I found out that the original Ring was a porno. It's because I was watching one of the filmmakers talk about it.
But you were saying that your image of them is fairly low budget films, right?
Yeah, because a lot of the films look fairly naturalistic. Like, they're not heavily stylized or colored. The big thing is, like, I guess the production design in terms of placement of objects. Like, they would like place things in such a way that would draw your eyes to the characters. And there's a lot of long takes. Sometimes a little bit flat looking, but I think it adds to the aesthetic. And I think the movie that does it the best was the first Grudge movie, because you can see that bits of film grain, and it just adds to the cursed tape vibe. Like, it's just something that's been filmed just on a digital camera.
Yeah, it's spooky. VHS is spooky.
It just adds to the vibe. It feels real, you know, and that adds to the horror that it can happen. This is happening to a place that we're familiar with.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Especially The Grudge. Like, I mean, it takes a place that you should feel safe in, like the home, and it turns it into something horrifying.
Fuck, dude. The apartments that we stayed at in Japan,
They are so
especially
The Grudge.
I lived in an apartment where we had that drawer. Like, I can't quite explain it, but if you've seen The Grudge and there's like those kind of sliding closets, like I had one of those, and it's like I would never look at it while I was asleep because I'd always turn away from it because I just didn't want to see like some bitch just like open it. Like, it's pretty scary.
Yeah, traditional Japanese housing is kind of spooky, and I think we have those films to thank for that. But yeah, I think that quality of filming is very apparent when you compare Ringu to The Ring, the American remake. Obviously, we mentioned before that The Ring had a bigger budget than Ringu. I feel like they tried to replicate the tone and even the coloring a bit. Like they tried hard not to steer too far from the original, but like it's pretty. You see it the most, I think, in the scene where Sadako / Samara climbs out of the television.
Yeah,
like that is what everybody's been waiting for, basically, because we'd all heard about this scene that is terrifying, and it is terrifying in both films.
Oh, for sure.
I think,
yeah.
But there are subtle differences, like in Ringu, I think the body acting is a lot better. I think in the remake they used a girl, like a young girl actress.
Yeah.
Whereas in Ringu, it's a woman, and she's able to kind of contort her body and move in a very specific and unsettling manner. And yeah, that kind of compensates for the lack of polish. Whereas in the American remake, they've added a few effects, like when she climbs out of the TV, like water is dripping from her, but the motion is a bit smoother, and like the way she comes out of the TV is a bit smoother as well.
Okay, yeah.
But I don't know, if I had to choose one, probably I think Ringu is scarier. That scene is done in a more scary fashion. I don't know, it's just something about the way that she moves, and even that kind of disconnect between like she's in the TV and then suddenly she's outside of the TV is just like, it looks less smooth, but in a way that's scarier to me.
You're not going to hear me say this often, especially for a purist such as me.
Are you a purist, Harvey? I didn't know you were a purist.
I found, and I'm not sure if this is because I saw it first, because it could be that, the scene where the mother discovers the girl's corpse was scarier in the remake. That scene alone gave me many sleepless nights. It didn't get me as much when I saw it in the original, but maybe that's on the makeup or lack of effects.
Definitely the American remake has some better effects.
It's one of the few remakes that I'm actually going to recommend people to watch as well as the original, because it's good.
There are a lot of different types of horror films, and I feel like depending on the type of horror fan you are, you might be looking for something different, but like Asian horror has a lot to offer any horror fan, I feel like. Like if you're more into horror comedies, watch.
Yeah, you can watch the cult stuff, like Machine Girl.
Yeah, the exploitation stuff is pretty fun. Yeah,
I'm not a big fan of those.
Yeah, but like a lot of people are. You know,
I know people that like those movies, and a bit too schlocky for me.
Sure.
But they're good. Yeah. if you like that kind of stuff.
If you want something really stupid, you can watch Sadako versus Kanako. You know that film that was announced as an April Fool's joke, and then they just followed through with it. So probably pretty good, right?
Yeah, maybe we should kind of wrap it up. As much as I want to keep talking about it.
We'll definitely do another episode about this topic, because there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot. We haven't even scratched the surface of Asian horror cinema.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, guys, what is your favorite Asian horror film? How did you get into it? Do you prefer the American remakes?
No.
Do you prefer?
No,
Do you prefer?
don't get an option, guys. No, you can watch what you want to watch.
Every opinion is valid, but you're wrong. Do you prefer Japanese horror? Do you prefer Korean horror? Do you prefer Thai horror? Do you prefer Hong Kong or Chinese horror? Let us know. You can contact us at twoasianblokes@gmail.com, or you can join our Facebook group and discuss this topic more. Until next time, bye.
Bye.